Hi, I'm Doug Black, editor-in-chief at Inside HPC. And today at Virtual SC21, we're talking with Sumit Puri. He is CEO of Composable computing company Liqid. Sumit, welcome.
Hey, good afternoon, Doug. Good to be here.
All right, good to see you again. So why don't we start off maybe with a quick refresh on Liqid? You were an early competitor in the composable space, am I right?
Yeah, we like to think that we were one of the category definers.
Okay.
And we can share a little bit on our perspective of composable, right? We think there's a fundamental transformation happening inside the data center, and we're moving away from what we call statically configured infrastructure to an area where we believe the infrastructure will be dynamic or dynamically configurable in order to fulfill that vision of the dynamic data center. In our opinion, there's two fundamental technologies that are required to make that happen. Number one is around this concept or this idea around the disaggregation of hardware. And then number two is some very sophisticated software that can take these pools of disaggregated hardware and compose them into physical infrastructure to go service the next generation emerging workloads that our data center customers are trying to deploy. And so what Liqid builds here is we build, number one, software that allows us to compose our data center dynamically, and a little bit of fabric technology that enables the disaggregation of off-the-shelf hardware.
Okay, great. So now looking at SC this year, what are you all going to be featuring at the conference?
Yeah, so it's an exciting show for us. We play a lot in the HPC market segment. And so we're actually releasing one of our new fabric expansion solutions, the EX4400, which is really focused at the disaggregation of devices like GPUs. We think GPUs and accelerators are playing a very important part inside the data center as we move to these next generation workloads like artificial intelligence, machine learning, data inference, high performance storage, feeding large amounts of these accelerators. And so what we're going to be announcing is our new platform that enables the disaggregation and dynamic composability of these accelerators. And so our EX4400 solution will enable us to disaggregate and dynamically compose these accelerators to different compute elements inside the rack. It is a Gen4 PCIe-based solution, and we'll have two versions of it, one that will hold 10 accelerators and another one that will hold 20 accelerators. We think the disaggregation of GPUs inside the data center will become more important as we move forward.
Okay, so tell us why is the ability to compose GPUs so important?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And so if we think about the data center and some of the other technologies that we've been fundamentally able to disaggregate, it changed the way that we consume those devices. For example, when we disaggregated storage and we put disaggregated storage inside the data center, we fundamentally changed the way that storage was consumed by compute. And we think a similar benefit will happen around GPUs. When we are able to disaggregate these GPUs and dynamically compose them to the compute elements that need them, number one, we think we're going to drive higher levels of utilization of these very expensive resources. We think we can have a direct impact on power, cooling, and the environmental aspects of deploying these very power-hungry GPUs. And at the end of the day, if we can disaggregate these GPUs, take the utilization rate from 20% because they're statically configured, move them around to where they are best used and squeeze 40, 50, 60% utilization out of these devices, we think the economics will make a lot of sense for our data center customers. And so we think the disaggregation of GPUs inside the data center are going to play a critical part, and more of the workloads rely on these accelerators. Machine learning, deep learning, data inference don't exist without these kinds of devices for the most part. A lot of times we talk about a one-to-one correlation. No GPU equals no AI in many scenarios, right? And so as AI becomes more relevant inside the data center, we have to come out with more creative, better ways to consume these devices. The old way, we used a $5,000 compute element. Now we're using a $10,000 GPU, and in some scenarios, 2, 4, 8, and in some of our customers, 16 of these devices inside of the environment. And so static is not a very good way to consume these very important resources. We think dynamically consuming them is the way to go.
Okay, interesting. You're talking about really stretching your GPU dollars. So if that's important, granted. But what other capabilities does Liqid CDI bring to IT?
Yeah, so that's a fair question, right? The way that we view the world, right, is number one, we have to be multi-fabric. We have to be able to disaggregate our infrastructure. Liqid has been known for disaggregating over PCIe, but we also need to be able to disaggregate over Ethernet. We need to be able to disaggregate over InfiniBand. We will be one of the leaders in the disaggregation of an emerging interface called CXL, which will be very important for memory. So if we're going to take this approach to disaggregation of the data center, we have to first and foremost be a multi-fabric orchestration tool, which is what we are. PCIe, Ethernet, InfiniBand, soon CXL. We will be able to enable the disaggregation of devices over all of those. Secondly, is you have to be a multi-device disaggregator, right? Meaning not just GPUs, not just storage, but networking cards and FPGAs and TPUs and DPUs and whatever PU the industry comes up with. We have to embrace all the devices. What we like to say a lot of times is mapping an NVMe drive over Ethernet is not composable infrastructure. That's NVMe over fabric, which is a subset of delivering a comprehensive composable solution. So the other side of it is multi-fabric and then multi-device. And the last piece of it is usability. We must integrate into the tools that our customers are using, integrate into Kubernetes, integrate into VMware, integrate into Slurm, integrate into all the frameworks that our customers are using today, so we can really deliver on the vision and the dream of dynamic composability without making people learn a bunch of new software.
Okay, great. So we understand you're releasing a paper with industry analyst firm ESG on software-defined infrastructure and sustainability. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, so I think it's really important. I think a lot of times the environmental impacts of the data center tend to get overlooked, right? And some of the facts that are out there, there were 500,000 data centers in 2012. Now we're approaching 8 million data centers. 14% of the world's carbon emissions, in the next 15 years, will be created by the data center. 20% of the world's power will be consumed by data centers by 2025. And I think this one is phenomenal, which is the average data center consumes 3 to 5 million gallons of water per day, which I think most people don't realize, primarily for evaporative cooling, right? And so we need to do something about this. If we stay on this trajectory, it's 20% of the world's power now, and by 2050, what are we going to be? Half of the world's power is going to the data center. That's non-sustainable, right? And so fundamentally, we have to go approach this problem as an industry. And what we like to say, there is no bigger knob that we can turn inside the data center, more important than utilization rate of the very expensive, very power-hungry devices that we are putting out there. Typical utilization rate sits at 20%, primarily because things are statically configured. If we can dynamically move them around and double and quadruple the utilization rates of our infrastructure, maybe we can do with 2 racks of infrastructure what previously took 3 racks of infrastructure to do. And if we can do that, then we can have a direct impact on power, on cooling, on water consumption, on all of the things that count. And so we're going to be releasing a paper with ESG here in the near future, really highlighting, number one, the problems that exist inside the data center, and then number two, how technologies like dynamic composability can actually have a meaningful impact.
Okay, great stuff. So Sumit, what else are you excited about at SC21 this year?
Well, what I'll say is I'm excited the world is getting back out there. I'm excited to talk to our customers live. I'm decided to talk to our partners live. I'm decided to excited to show the world what Liqid has been working on and what we've been developing in the last 18 months since all of us have had the world changed on us. And so really we view this a little bit of a getting back to business party here, right? It's going to be fun to showcase the technologies that we're working on. It's going to be fun to talk about some of the next generation stuff that we are thinking about, that we are working towards for 2022. And it's going to be great to actually see people shake hands, hand business cards out, and share a beer with some of my fellow colleagues. So I'm really looking forward to getting back out there, and we're bringing a big team, and we're planning on putting on a big show here. So it's going to be fun.
That's awesome. Well, we spent a little time with Sumit Puri. He is CEO of Liqid. Thanks so much for your time, Sumit, and have a great SC21.
I appreciate it, Doug. Thanks to you and the HPC team, and we're excited to have a great show. Be well.
Great.
Thanks.